So it's almost that time of the year. We're about a week away before Alabama faces Miami. Kickoff, Chick-Fil-A Classic, right in Atlanta. A game where not a lot of fans are not really interested in even watching this game. I know a lot more fans are definitely more interested in watching Georgia versus Clemson than Alabama versus Miami. I think a lot of people expect Miami to just kind of be the same team like they were last year, where they got talent, but they're not good enough to hang with the top tier or the top tier teams like Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, um, Ohio State. So obviously this is going to be a game where I think Miami is heavily going to be the underdog. The odds are going to be in Alabama's favor. A lot of people will be placing bets and definitely going to be taking the minus on Alabama to crush Miami. Um, so obviously, it's going to be a game it's going to be interesting, but at the same time, a lot of fans expect Bama to just run through Miami. You know, when I look at this game and just talking about this preview, there are some things that I think Miami can potentially expose for Bama. I think it's some things that, if you look at all the openings the Alabama's kind of had, they've had slow starts. Alabama has been known to start off kind of slow in opening games, and they don't really take off until the second half. The second half is when Alabama's they're on berserk mode. They're on that berserker mode, and all of a sudden they're just crushing their opponent. But especially in the first game, they're known as slow starters. Right? You talk about an Alabama team that's lost three starters on the offensive line, and not just three starters, but three all SEC All-American players, including two players that won the first two rounds. In Landry Dickerson could have easily been a first-round pick if he never would have had that season-ending injury. So you lose those three players. Yes, you have Chris Owens who has playing time experience, but again, he played with four guys that were all SEC caliber players. And now, for the most part, two or three of those guys are gone. And now you kind of have to replace them with backup players, players that Chris Owens has kind of never really even played with before in a real starting game. So the chemistry, continuity, especially when you're going against different formations and stuff and different schematics, can definitely be a little bit tough. Bama's also been known over the last couple opening games that, hey, they have not run the ball really well. Miami has some talent on the defensive line, especially a guy like Niesa Severa, who is one of the best defensive tackles in all of college football, especially one of the best run stuffers. So Miami could potentially cause some problems there. I also kind of look at the running back position. Speaking of running the football, right? Alabama's known as kind of slow, having a slow start there. Can they expose Brian Robinson? Is Brian Robinson truly going to be the number one guy, or do they need to look elsewhere? I think this is going to be a game where Alabama's going to rotate. And could Miami take advantage of that potential situation? Who knows? I think another area that they could potentially take care of is Bryce Young's inexperience. The fact of the matter is that Bryce Young is a five-star quarterback. Bryce Young was the number one dual threat coming out of college, extremely hyped up, but he's inexperienced. Even Trevor Lawrence struggled against A&M. Remember, he struggled against A&M, and he was benched for Kelly Bryant. Now, I'm not saying Bryce Young is going to get benched, but you can take advantage of that. Miami has some experience in the secondary, especially with guys like Bubba Bolden, and obviously you got Tyreek Stevenson, who's a very talented player who's very versatile, who can not only play on the outside, but can definitely play he's more of a nickel guy, but can definitely play on the outside. So can Miami kind of take advantage of Bryce Young's inexperience, right? We talk about Niesta Severa, Miami's secondary there. They do have some playmakers. Can they kind of take advantage of that? And with the inexperience of Alabama's offensive line, could some of those edge rushers get behind, and especially the pass rush in the interior, can they take advantage of Alabama's offensive line, a little bit of that slow start, that weakness that they could potentially have, and could they put pressure on Bryce Young that he's never seen before, right? Bryce Young hasn't gotten hit in training camp or in spring. Bryce Young's going to get hit in that game. So could Miami take advantage of the pressure of pressuring Bryce Young? Who knows? So those are just some things that they can probably expose. I also kind of look at, too, on the defensive side of the ball, just real quick. I also look at Will Mallory. Alabama has had a history of not doing well against tight ends, especially what they did last year. Look at the Ole Miss tight end, had over 120 yards. You look at Whittemire, demolished Bama. Kyle Pitts, we all know what he did there. Will Mallory is one of the best tight ends in college football, and he's one of the, not just that, he's one of the best receiving tight ends that can definitely get behind a defense and definitely take advantage of the mismatch between a linebacker or a star, or a star cornerback or even a safety. So, Will Mallory has an advantage. You have speed with Charleston Rambo, who you could potentially line up maybe against the number 2 guy in Kool-Aid, Jalen, or Kyrie. So there are certain advantages that I think Miami could potentially take advantage for this football game. But then I look at Alabama, I look at the totality. And if you look at everything, Alabama has not lost an opening season game since, 2001? Alabama, especially in the Nick Saban era, they've never lost. Bama has dominated time and time and again. And even with Alabama's slow starts, like we've seen in the past, eventually in the second half, they get their crap together and Bama dominates. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it goes. I think the closest game they ever had was probably 2014. Well, not even the closest game, but I would say the closest game that they've ever had since was 2014 against West Virginia. Besides that, it's been a blowout every single time. Bama has just dominated. And when you take a look at it, and even though I talked about some of the weaknesses that Miami can take advantage of, Miami has way more weaknesses or way more unknowns, uncertainties than Alabama does. And when you look at Alabama's biggest strength, that defensive line, which is probably the best defensive line talent with a combination of talent and experience that they've had since 2016, right? You look at Will Anderson and Christopher Allen coming off the edge, and then you look at their backups, all 5-star guys like Chris Braswell. Look at King Makuta. Quindarius Robinson also coming off the edge too. Drew Sanders can also play there at the outside rusher. Like, Bama has players. They have playmakers there coming off the outside. You look at the defensive line, it's one of the deepest of all in college football. It's one of the deepest groups in all of college football. Look at DJ Dale. Personally, Timothy Smith should be starting, but if DJ Dale does start, you have a guy that's had 3 years of playing time experience. Timothy Smith, a guy that has way more upside and way more talent, and I think he's just a better overall player than DJ Dale. Timothy Smith is also going to be rotating. Then you look at Byron Young, you look at Fedarian Mathis, LeBron Ray's coming off an injury after his 5th year. He's going to be there with plenty of experience. Look at Byron Young. I think I just talked about Justin Igbogbe as well. I mean, Bama has a lot of depth, and they're still adding on depth with bringing in guys like Deron Payne, 5-star defensive tackle, coming in there as well. Like, Bama just has a lot of playing experience on that defensive line. Then you look at their inside linebacking core. The potential combination of potentially seeing Christian Harris with Henry To'oTo'o, I think will be the best linebacking core in all of college football. But if Henry To'oTo'o doesn't start, then guess what you have? You have Jalen Moody, who has plenty of experience with this defense. You have Deontay Lawson, who's shown a lot of promise. And not just that, but you also have Shane Lee, who started the entire 2019 football season that you could potentially include in there, and a guy that's known the Pete Golding defense for 3 years. They have a very solid safety group with Jordan Battle and DeMarco Helms. Daniel Wright, if you want to include him in there. Malachi Moore and Brian Branch is probably the best pair of nickel/star guys in the country, especially Malachi Moore, the playmaker that he is. Like, I just look at Alabama as a whole, just talent-wise, coaching-wise, even though they have some experience at the coaching positions. Bama they've always dominated in that way. So even though I do believe that Alabama's going to win, and that's just throwing off the bias off of me, I just look at the history, and I look at what Miami's just going into the season. I think Miami is going to surprise people of how they do in the first half. I think that they actually will play well enough in the first half to compete with Bama. But I think, as we've always seen, Bama just pulls away with it in the second half. Are there things that scare me? Absolutely. I think that Miami can potentially, if De'Ara King is healthy, and if their running game and if their running game can kind of get on going, again, you look at guys like Cameron Harris and Don Chaney Jr. I'm forgetting Jalen Knighton, who's one of the best kind of 3-headed monsters in the country. And Miami has a very kind of solid foundation with the offensive line leading with Zion Nelson. I definitely believe that Miami can potentially do something. I think Miami will slow down the pace a little bit. I think Miami is going to try to do their best to tire out Alabama, but not really push the pace too much. I don't think Miami wants to be in a shootout with Alabama. They want to try to tire out Alabama, slow them down a little bit. I think Miami has the potential to kind of do that and really hang in there with Alabama in the first half. I think the question is how well can Miami keep it up for all 4 quarters? I think that's the kind of the question, especially, again, these opening games, no matter who Alabama played against, whether it was Florida State, whether it was Wisconsin, really the only team that kind of played with them and hang in there with all of them for 4 quarters was West Virginia back in 2014. But even then, the last 5-6 minutes of the game, Bama pulled away with it. So the question is can Miami hang with them for 4 quarters, or will Alabama typically do what Alabama does, and that's have slow starts, and in the second half, pull away with it? Let me know how you guys feel about it. I'll probably have more of a score prediction video about that. But as far as could Alabama potentially blow them out? Maybe. Could Miami hang in there with Alabama? Maybe.